Hello, welcome to Board with Paint. Today, we'll be painting the Druid from the Mythic Tier of the HeroQuest board game. As you can see, I've already gone ahead and prepped the miniature for painting and given it a zenithal prime just like in previous videos. You can see those for how I did that. Let's go ahead and get started. We'll be going with a pretty dark skin tone today, so appropriately we'll be using dark Fleshtone from Vallejo Game Color. She's got all these vines and things on her legs. It's fine to just cover that with the Fleshtone right now. We'll be touching those up a little bit later. It took me a moment to realize that her entire back seems to be bare, so that will all be skin colored. Next, I'll be painting the leaves that are around her waist with Deathworld Forest. This is also going on her leaf bikini top and the armband that she's got. Next, we'll mix an extremely dark purple for the hair. I'm using Eldandil Violet and some black for this. We're not actually going to paint her hair purple. We're just using the purple to add a little bit of a contrast with the rest of the colors on the model. Next, I'll be painting her staff with some peanut butter. Not actual peanut butter, it's peanut butter by Scale Color. I'm giving the flower in her hair a base coat of Evil Sunz Scarlet. Now we'll take this and thin it down quite a lot to get a nice glaze consistency, and use this to glaze in the red at the bottom of the leaves that are around her skirt. We'll apply this in several coats, waiting for it to dry completely between each coat, and we want to make sure we're always brushing from the top down to the bottom. This will make sure that the most intense amount of paint is released at the bottom of the leaf and not at the top, and that's how we'll achieve that nice smooth transition between the green and the red. Now I'm going over this with a second coat. And another coat. Remember to let the previous coat completely dry before adding the next one. Now to ease that transition a little more, we'll go back to the Deathworld Forest and thin it down. And we'll use that same glaze consistency, only this time we'll be brushing from the bottom to the top. So start your brush strokes around where the red transition starts and go upwards with it. This should help you to smooth out the transition between the two colors. I'm using Vallejo Model Color Buff to paint the ropes or vines that are holding her clothes on. Sorry about the camera, it clears up in a little bit. For the vines wrapped around her legs, I'm using Skrag Brown. I also used this color to paint the little bundle of thorns in her hair. I just didn't get that on camera. And I'm using Vallejo Game Color Charred Brown for the little satchel. Now I'll move on to highlighting the leaves by mixing a little bit of Toxic Waste Green into the Deathworld Forest. And this will be applied to the upper portions of those leaves that are going around her waist and that are covering her chest. Now I'll mix in a little more Toxic Waste Green and apply the highlight again. I'm not trying too hard to go for a smooth transition here because I think the brush strokes are actually going to contribute to giving the leaves a little bit of texture. Now I'll highlight the flower with some Wild Rider Red. And then I decided to thin this down and boost a little bit of highlight on the tips of those leaves just to bring out the red a little more. Now we'll do the same thing, mixing a little bit of moon yellow in to brighten that up. And here's another highlight after we add a little more yellow. Now I'll mix some of that yellow in with the Skrag Brown and use this to highlight the bundle of thorns in her hair and also the thorns wrapped around her legs. And we'll boost this with a second highlight, adding a little bit more yellow. Now we'll return to the leaves and use some Athonian Camoshade to shade the recesses of the leaves. So this will be all the veins and different texture that's on the leaves. We want to stay away from the areas that we highlighted though. To keep the wash where I want it, I wet the area with some water and let it dry for a few minutes. And then I can just touch the wash to the miniature and it'll just fill in those recesses where the water is still wet. And where the water is dried, the wash won't pool. Now for everybody's favorite part, the whites of the eyes. And once again, I'm using Vallejo Model Color Ivory. And also, once again, I mess it up. That's okay, we'll fix it in post. Now we'll get out our Agrax Earthshade and apply this over all those ropes and vines that are around her body. This is also going on the flowers and things in her hair, and I'm also shading the entire staff with this. And here I'm just returning back to the original Fleshtone and cleaning up the eyes where I made them a little too large. I do this again after the next part. I probably should have waited, but that's not how it worked out. Now I'm going in with some Decay Black and filling in the pupils. I end up messing it up and fixing it off camera. I guess that would work if you wanted to give you the side eye. Now with some Tau Light Ochre, I'm painting the hand that's partially transformed into what looks like a tiger in the artwork. Now on to highlighting the wood grain that's on the staff. I'm just mixing some ivory in with our peanut butter. Once again, you don't want to get peanut butter out of your kitchen. Use the paint color by Scale Color, or some other yellowish brown would work fine. I'm just trying to trace the wood grain that's sculpted on the staff itself, just following those along. This isn't so much a highlight as much as just trying to bring out the texture. Now we'll highlight the hair by mixing some Braineater Azure in with our Violet and Decay Black mix that we used for the base coat. And I'm putting this on any upward facing areas or areas that are raised up from the sculpt. Here I'm getting that ponytail that goes down in front of her chest. Now we'll do a second highlight by adding some ivory to the mix. And we'll hit the same areas here that we did before. Now we'll lighten it even more, but we don't want it to get too purple, so I'm still adding a little bit of black into this. Hopefully by now the staff is dry, so we'll go with some brown ink, wick off excess on a paper towel so you don't flood the miniature, and we'll coat the entire staff with this. I really like this recipe for wood. It gives it a nice, rich look. You can see this almost goes on as if we're using a wood stain. It'll fill in those recesses nicely, giving you some shadow, but it also darkens the highlight color and gives it more of a woody appearance. And we'll do something similar here with the hair, only this time with black ink. Be sure to wick it off. We don't want too much on our brush. And this will go over every bit of the hair. I'm also using this to draw the stripes on the tiger hand. Now we'll move on to highlighting the skin by mixing the dark flesh tone with some Ungor Flesh. The final skin tone we end up with is quite a bit darker than what's in the artwork. If you're looking for a skin tone that more closely matches the artwork, which appears to be like a very tan Caucasian skin tone, you can follow the tutorial I did for the Barbarian, where I do a similar skin tone to that. You may want to even go a little darker than that, depending on your preference. For whatever reason, this particular mix of paints seemed to go on a little bit chalky. This is usually because the paint's a little too thick, so I tried thinning it down to alleviate that problem a little bit. But we also go back in with the darker flesh tone and glaze that on to bring some of that chalkiness down. As usual, when we highlight the face, we want to focus on the nose, the forehead, the cheekbones, and the chin, or as I like to call it, the sunburn area. We'll add a little more Ungor Flesh to the mix and apply the highlight again, covering a smaller area than before. And be sure to keep your paint fairly thin. This will help the transitions be a little smoother and is also a little more forgiving with mistakes. I want to make sure here I don't cover the belly button with highlight. And we want to make sure we get the tops of the shoulders, the shoulder blades, and the outer parts of the back. Leave that middle of her back kind of in shadow since it's more recessed. And then we'll put another coat of highlight on the face. We'll hit those same areas, but cover slightly less space. And we'll go a little bit lighter with more Ungor Flesh. This will be the highest level of highlight, so we want to keep this isolated to some very small areas. And here I'm thinning down the dark flesh tone into a glaze, wicking off excess just like we did with the inks, and glazing this in to ease those transitions or to bring down the highlight where it seems like it got a little too bright or where it got too chalky. Next, we'll shade the tiger claw with some Fuegan Orange. Or is it Fuegan Orange? Let me know in the comments how you're supposed to pronounce it. I'm also putting this on the stuff that's in her hair, just to add some color. Here I'm doing where the hair is tied together with some buff. I missed that earlier. And here I'm getting out some Cassandora Yellow shade and applying this on the stuff in her hair as well. We want to get a lot of colors layered in there. Then I'll paint all the claws on the tiger hand with pure black. After that, I'll apply some Tau Light Ochre as a highlight to all the areas of fur on the claw. At this point, I thought some areas of the miniature were kind of blending together, so I went in with some very thinned down black paint, and around all of the different transitions between different areas of fabric or different materials, I added dark lines. You could also use something like a Nuln Oil for this if you're more comfortable using a wash. But this is just going in and hitting anywhere where I feel like it needs a little more detail, especially around those vines on the legs and the ropes around her chest. And then here I'm reinforcing the separation between the leaves and some of the veins. Going back to the flower in her hair, I think the washes took away some of the saturation. So I'm going back in with Evil Sunz Scarlet and highlighting those up again. Next, I'll paint her lips using a mix of Evil Sunz Scarlet and Ungor Flesh. I know it's a bit strange that a woman who lives in the forest and is one with nature cares about her makeup, but it's in the artwork, and I think it also adds a little bit more interest to the face, which is kind of boring looking without it. Since we're getting near the end, we'll paint the base with Hull Red. This is a hero miniature, and that's the color we're using for all the heroes. I almost forgot about the satchel, which we'll now highlight with some Charred Brown mixed with some Tau Light Ochre. Here I'm just cleaning up some areas of the face with the dark flesh tone. This will help make the lips stand out a little better, and I'm also using it to ease the transitions from the highlights to the shadowed areas. Now I'm going to go in with some Celestra Grey and paint in the paintings that she has on her skin. I'm just kind of making this up as I go. I'm giving her a circle on one of her arms with a small dot in the middle. And then she has these big swooping lines going down her legs. You can absolutely consider this to be an optional step. It's not really that noticeable, but it is in the artwork. And here's another miniature completed, the Druid. Thanks for watching Board with Paint. If you found this helpful and you liked the video, tell YouTube you liked the video and click that button. It only takes you a second, but it does wonders for the channel. If you're interested in more stuff from me, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If there's anything that you'd like to see me paint that I'm not painting, or there's a game you think I should look into, let me know down in the comments and I will see what I can do. In the meantime, I wish you all happy painting.